Hi all, very good morning. So in the last part of our class, we were able to look through, just let me open the notepad. So in the last part of our class, we were able to look through what is instance metadata, placement groups, and what can we do with the help of IAM user, and the role in order to help the EC2 instances connect with the S3. So the roles are the most secured way of helping the EC2 instances get connected with the S3 buckets. And we also learned few of the things as a part of command line on how do we connect with our AWS services with the help of command line. Specifically, we started connecting with the help of first with the help of access key and the secret access key, where we learned that all the credentials of a specific user in terms of access key and secret access key get stored in a specific path where .aws folders get created, and inside which these credentials will be. And using those credentials, we are specifically accessing the S3 buckets. We were able to send the data from our local EC2 instance to the S3 buckets, and from the S3 buckets also we were able to get back to the EC2 instances. And in part of today's lab, we are going to learn about what is EBS versus instance store volumes, what is a RAID volume, and what is EFS, that is Elastic File System. So these are the topics that we are going to put through across for today, and we are going to learn about it. Give me a minute, I'll just be back. Sorry for the delay. Okay, so the first topic that we are going to learn about today is about EBS versus instant store volumes. Now, if you would have looked through whenever we were launching through the instance, let me open up console first. So it's taking a little while. So as you all know, EBS stands for Elastic Block Store. Before the EBS volumes were actually available for the usage, we had something called as instant store volumes. So just as for the information, we have to know what is the difference between the EBS versus instant store. But yes, in the real time, we do not use instant store volumes anymore at this point. Because instant store volumes are otherwise called as ephemeral storage, which means the data, anything that is stored on those ephemeral storage can be lost. Okay, there I am in my AWS console. I'll quickly navigate down to the EC2 section. Now, whenever I go ahead and click on launch instance, so quickly when we do it, so here if you see, there is something called as root device type. You will be able to see beneath each of this AMI information, right? It says root device type as EBS, which means the volume that we are going to attach to this EC2 to this AMI will be basically the EBS volumes. Similarly, we'll also be able to see the instant store volumes. So in order to see where is the instant store volumes, as I just said, currently Amazon doesn't support anymore on the instant store volumes. However, people have created their own AMIs, which is available as a part of community. You just go down to the community AMIs and just scroll down a little more, and you'll be able to see that I'll be able to select a AMI on the basis of operating system, or maybe on the basis of architecture, or also on the basis of the root device type. So here I can select the instant store, and I'll be able to see that there are certain AMIs which have got the root device type as the instant store volumes. So I'm going to pick up one of them here, and then just let's go ahead and spin up one of the instance. We just check out if we have availability of any other machine. mostly we might not get a part of free tier here. So I'm just going to simply go ahead and pick up one of the instance for the purpose of this lab. So while you are trying to do this specific lab of the instance store volumes, you may incur a little charges on your AWS account. So just be conscious about it. However, just it is really important to know what are the differences between the instance store volume and the EBS volumes, because in the exam or sometimes in the interview they do ask about this, but in the real time, however, we do not use the instance store volumes anymore. So I'm going to launch it as a part of my default VPC. I'm going to ensure that the public setting is enabled so that we'll be able to log in. And I'll just go ahead and say add storage. So if you see, this is the first difference that we'll be able to get through. Now, whenever we are selecting the EBS volumes, automatically when I come down to this specific page of add storage, you will be actually able to see that 8 GB of GP2, that is general purpose SSD drives, is automatically added as a root volume for the Linux machines, and for the Windows 30 GB is added. However, if I'm trying to use the instance store volumes, nothing is being added here. I just need to go ahead and click on add new volume, and then it basically adds the instance store volumes. However, if you see here, there is no size mentioned, there is no type mentioned, there is nothing mentioned in terms of whether it will have better IOPS or whether it will have throughput in terms of MB per second, right? I'll not have any control over this specific volume in terms of size, type, and the speed. I can just only select it as an instance store volume and add it to my EC2 instance. Also, I do not get an option to add the extra volumes here. However, if I want to attach extra volumes to this EC2 instance, I'll be able to do after the instance is being launched. So here it says you can attach the additional instance store volume. Yes, we'll not be able to attach any more instance store volumes, but if you want to attach additional EBS volumes, it can be done after launching an instance, but not the instance store volumes. So there can be only one instance store volume, and it can be attached only while the system is being launched, and that will act as a root volume itself. So I'll quickly go ahead and add next tags. So I'll attach it to one of the existing security group that we have, SSH, and then I'll quickly go ahead and review and launch this using one of my key pair that I already in the machine. I'm going to pick up the Virginia key pair. I'll just say choose. Okay, and I acknowledge I have it in launch instance. So while this instance is being launched, let's go ahead and first pick up the first difference that we have just found out. Yeah, so the first difference in the EBS versus instance store volume will not be able to view the size, type, speed, any of these parameters basically as a part of instance store volume. Now let's check out what are the other differences. I'll just go scroll down and just say view instances. Now that the instance is up and running, if I go down to the space where we have something called as volumes, usually if it is an EBS volume, we will be able to see it here, right? Even though it is a root volume, we will be able to see that it will be available here. But in terms of instance store volumes, it doesn't even show up into the console place where we actually check out our EBS volumes. So the second difference will be we will not be able to view the instance store volumes from the console perspective. So we do not get the size of this specific volume at all. And let's talk about the one more difference. If I go down to the instances here, this is my instance store EC2 instance. I also have one more EC2 instance here in the Mumbai region. I'll quickly go ahead and open that as well. I'll just copy this. Okay. While the tab opens up, so if you see, this is my instance store volume. If I click on the actions and then just say go to launch instance, You see the start option is grayed out, stop option is also grayed out, and I just have the options of reboot and the terminate. When I go to the stop option, it clearly says instance store bagged instances cannot be stopped. So if you think that you want to go ahead and stop this EC2 instance, you'll not be able to do so. So only thing that we can do is reboot. So in case, let's say you have installed certain softwares and you want to get this system to be restarted in order to get those software changes updated. So the reboot option is available. However, the stop option is not available at all. So that's why the instance store volumes are actually called as ephemeral storage, which means it is a temporary storage. So if my instance is running and let's say something goes wrong inside it, like it does also happen with our Windows laptops or computers at times, suddenly the computer hangs off and we have to completely go ahead and switch it off, or sometimes a blue screen error or some kind of error we do get it and will not be able to proceed further. So let's say anything of such kind happens with this instance store volumes, I specifically lose all the data, right? So I do not have any control over the volume. So I lose the volume, I lose all the data which is stored inside that. So that is when Amazon realized that people are actually not being able to use things properly with the instance store volumes, and then the EBS volumes were introduced, which are actually called as persistent storage. So if you check out this one, if I go to action and then just say instance state, you'll be able to see the stop option, reboot option, and the terminate option. And if I go even to the volume section, you'll be able to see that the root volume is being shown up here. Right? It says that this is attached to this EC2 instance as a root volume at /dev/xcda. So this is the third difference. We will not be able to stop the instance store volume. So let's written here. Instance store EC2 instance cannot be stopped, but that can be only restarted, and that is the reason. And the one more reason that we discussed here, like if anything happens to our instance store EC2 instances and it has to get stopped. So let's say like it has to be like which we discussed one of the scenario, like it gets corrupted or maybe I'm not able to proceed further, it gets hanged and suddenly it closes off, then I lose my complete instance store volume itself. So that's why they are actually called as ephemeral storage. So these are the major four differences between the EBS and the instance store volumes. So specifically when you're trying to attend an interview, they do ask about what can you do with the instance store volumes, are they really helpful or not. So currently, as in the real-time situations, no, it is not preferable to use, because if anything happens to the instance and then I completely lose the data. So any questions or queries on this part of EBS or the instance store volumes? Okay. So the next part of our topic is about the RAID volumes. So we are going to learn about what is a RAID and why do we create them actually. So before that, I'll just go ahead and clean up the part of instances that I have launched through. So this was just for the difference that I wanted to show. We have launched an instance store EC2 instance. I'll quickly go ahead and shut it down. Now, when we discuss about the RAID volumes, so what is RAID? RAID basically stands for redundant array of independent disks. So what happens basically in the RAID? So basically I have multiple volumes, and I'm trying to combine all of them in order to achieve the better output. So if you have seen, when we are launching our EC2 instance, I do get an option in order to attach multiple volumes to it, and each of the volume basically gets a base IOPS of 100. Let me show you in here. Yeah, if you have seen this, whenever I'm going to go ahead and create one EC2 instance here, and when I attach extra volumes, all of them basically get a base IOPS of 100, right? However, actually the real time is basically 3 IOPS per 1 GB, but as a baseline minimum, I'm getting the 100 IOPS on the every volume that I'm going to put across. Now let's say if I want to get higher output from the extra volumes that I have attached, right? So I have got two EBS volumes which are of size 88 GB each, and I'm getting 100 IOPS. So if I combine both of them virtually, physically they are different, but virtually, let's say if I want to go ahead and combine, then I get 200 IOPS. So my output, my throughput basically gets improved, right? So can we do it? Yes. So with the help of RAID volumes, we will be actually able to combine these volumes, and then we will be able to achieve the higher throughput. So let's see what are the different types of RAIDs. So I have RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, and the RAID 10. So before we go ahead and learn about it, I'll just quickly launch one of the Windows machine where we are going to learn how to create our RAID volume. So Windows instances take a little while to get the launch. So I'll pick up this 2016 base. I'll pick up the general purpose G2 micro. I'll go ahead and add a couple of volumes here. Go ahead and add the tags. RAID volume labs. I'll quickly put it across the security group. I'll just select the RDP one. Yeah, I'll go ahead and launch it. I'll use the Virginia keypad to launch this across. Okay, so this is now launching across. So as I said, we have 4 different types of RAIDs. That is RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, and the RAID 10. Now what happens with the RAID 0? So RAID 0 is basically striped. So when I stripe across the multiple volumes, I'll be able to create a volume with a higher size, but I do not get good redundancy. I get only the good performance because I'm basically combining both of them. So I'm getting higher size of 4 GB. Let's say currently in my case, we have 2 EBS volumes of 2 GB. And then if I'm going to go ahead and use this RAID 0, so basically I'll be able to combine it to get a 4 GB, and I'll be able to get a IOPS of double the number, that is 200 IOPS I'll be able to get. So I'll have a good performance, but there'll be no redundancy. What does the redundancy here mean? Now let's say if one of the disk gets corrupted, then I lose all the data on this specific RAID 0. That's why they say there's no redundancy in terms of data. Now when we talk about the RAID 1, basically it is mirrored and we have good redundancy. So whatever data I'm trying to store into the volume 1, automatically a mirror copy of the same gets created in the volume 2 as well. So that's why when we use the RAID 1, we get a good redundancy, but the performance is little affected. Not much, a little. That's why they are not written anything in terms of the performance. So in terms of RAID 1, we basically get good redundancy and the data is mirrored. So at least in this case, if any one of the volume fails, I still have the data available in the other one. And then we have a RAID 5, which is basically good for the read and bad for the writes. And AWS never ever recommends putting the volume on the RAID 5. Now RAID 5 basically works with the help of parity check mathematical formula, which actually does a calculation on the basis of which it is going to read the data as well as write the data to the disk. So there can be a case where the calculations can go wrong in between. So that's the reason the RAID 5 is never a recommended practice to go ahead and use as a EBS, as a combination of the EBS volumes ever. So in case if you are making an attempt to write for AWS Solutions Architect Associate exam, so in that specifically this question comes up, which of the, like there will be one specific scenario given in terms of the RAID volumes, and you may have to select this specific RAID 5, right? So RAID 5 will never be given as an option from the Amazon to be used as a selection of the EBS volume and use it across. And the most widely used across will be the RAID 10 as suggested by the Amazon. So RAID 10 is basically a combination of RAID 0 and the RAID 1. So the volumes are striped and mirrored so that we get good redundancy as well as the good performance in this case. So that was all about the introduction of the RAID volumes. Let's quickly go ahead into our Windows machine and create one RAID volume. So in order to connect to our Windows instance, we specifically need to click on this connect button. We need to pass our PEM file here. So the Virginia keypair.pem is something, the file that I need to pass through. So I'll quickly go ahead and say E drive. So there we go. I'm able to decrypt the password. I'll just go ahead and copy the public DNS name, user ID, and the password. I'll put it here. I'll copy this one first, and I'll click on my Windows button. I'll just say remote, and you'll be able to see that the remote desktop connection is available. I'll just click on this, and I'll put in my public DNS name, click on connect, and I'm going to go ahead and copy the password as well. So there we go. It's going to ask you to log in. So I'm going to use the more choices so that I'll also be able to enter the administrator name. So I just say administrator and then the password. So if everything goes well, it will ask you to verify the certificate. I'll say yes. So there we go. It is logged in into our Windows machine. Okay. So now the Windows instance is launched, and you see on the home screen here, you will be able to get the complete properties of the instance. However, we also know that how do we get the properties of this EC2 instance? We can go down to command prompt. We can play around with the instance metadata. Remember the URL of the instance metadata, that is 169.254.169.254/latest/meta-data. So this is the URL that we can basically use. So here he has already given us few parameters which are ready here. This is the host name, this is the instance ID, this is the public IP address, this is the private IP address, and this is the size of the instance. It is launched in the US East 1B as availability zone, and the architecture is currently AMD 64 with the memory of 1 GB. Now I'll quickly go ahead and click on this box here. So if I click on this PC, one second. So we had attached extra 3 volumes. Okay, let me just re-verify it once. It shows attached here, but it doesn't display it in here. Okay, we are able to see it from here that there are 3 disks which are of size 3 GB, but currently they appear to be offline. Let me see what is the case. So currently this appear to be offline. I'll just go and close this and restart the machine. So usually it basically shows that the 3 volumes are attached to this Windows instance. is not getting restarted as well. There's some trouble with this instance. I'll just quickly terminate it and then launch a new one. I'll just quickly go ahead and launch a new one. I'll pick up this R2012 base itself. We'll go with the general purpose T2 micro. And I'm going to keep everything as default here and go ahead and add the storage. So I'm going to add specifically 3 more volumes, and these are going to be of size 2 GB. I'll put the values as RAID lamps and then configure the security group, put it behind the Windows Server security group, and then quickly go ahead and review and launch this. Just recheck the storage details. Yeah. I'm going to use the Virginia key pair to go ahead and launch this and click on launch instances. So we'll wait for this instance to come up in a little while. Okay, there we go. We have our instance running. I'll just quickly refresh this page, and then we'll use our connect button to get the password for this machine. So it may take a little while more. So the RAID volumes are basically, as we learned, is to improve the performance by virtually combining them. So if I have a size of 2 GBs, I'm going to basically combine them into one single volume of 6 GB size, and I'm going to get a output of 300 IOPS, which is going to help me with the improvement of the performance of the disk, so that I'll be able to store the data at very faster rate onto the disks. Similarly, like what we could do in the placement groups, we are trying to virtually combine the complete instance itself, so that we'll be able to attain the high network bandwidth and the low latency. Similar in that way itself, here we are trying to combine the volumes, and then we are trying to achieve the higher IOPS. Okay, I'll click on the get password. I'll choose the file Virginia key pair. I'll open up the remote desktop. I'll put this up, password, and then say OK. It's going to ask me to verify the certificate. I'll say yes. So we'll wait for the page for the windows to display. So there we go. So our Windows Server 2012 has been just started up. So I'll quickly go down to this File Explorer. So there we see we have now the 4 disks C, D, E, and E and F. So the first C drive is the place where my all the configuration of operating system exists. So that is of basically size 30 gigs. And again, I have the D, E, and F drive, which is of size 2 GB. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and combine the 3 drives D, E, and F into one of them. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the disk management from this Windows button here. One sec. Here we are unable to see the Windows button, neither I'm able to open it up, because if I open it, this is of my computer that comes up. So if I click on Windows, let me check it once again. Not sure why Windows is behaving a little weird today. Yeah, so I was able to get this page of disk management. So I just went into my computer in the C drive, and then I just tried searching for the disk management here. Something like this. I just went here, go to the C drive. And I was able to get this, and when I click open this, I was able to open up the disk management.msc. This is the file which I was looking forward for. Since you are not able to see the Windows button, and if I click on the Windows button in my laptop, it is going to open up my laptop's configuration and not the other one. Yeah, Now we are able to see it. So you can also open up something like this. Okay, so this is the disk management service that I was looking for. So here we are able to see that I have a C drive which is of 30 GB. I also have D, E, and F which is of size 2 GB. So what I'm going to do is, specifically first I'm going to go ahead and delete these volumes. So it will say that if you have any data on these volumes, that is going to get deleted. That's fine. We do not have anything as such at this moment of time. So I'm just going to go ahead and first delete this, all of them, so that we'll be able to combine it into one virtual volume. Now I'll go ahead and click on the right click on this volume and then just say that I want to create a new striped volume here in this case. So this basically striped volume is basically a RAID 0 in this case. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on next. So here I get option if I want to go ahead and add the extra drives that I have got. So I'll just go ahead and add disk 2 and disk 3 here as well. So my total size is going to become 6135, and then I'm just going to go ahead and click on next. And it does ask me what is the name that you would like to give to this drive. So I'll just say let it be the D drive, and then just click next. So this is going to be of type NTFS file system. So Windows is much more popular with NTFS file systems, and Linux is where we play around with ext4 and the XFS file systems. So I'll just go ahead and click on this one small check button, that is perform a quick format, and then click on next, and then just finish it off. It does give me a message saying that the disks are now going to get converted into dynamic. So as we all know, if it is a striped volume, if anything happens to it, I lose all the data on the volumes. So I'll just say it's fine. I'll click on yes. So there we go. It has now created the volume into one with the D drive, and which has got a size of 6 GB. So if I go back to File Explorer and look forward for it from the My Computer perspective, you will be able to see that there are only two volumes. One is the C drive and the D drive, and the D drive is basically 6 GB in size. However, in real time, if you check out in the disk management, it shows that it is actually a combination of 3 different volumes. Right? So this is how I'll be able to create my RAID volumes, and then I'll be able to use it across. So any questions or queries here from any one of you? Specifically at times when we want a better performance with a lower cost, then we go for these RAID volumes. Yeah, RAIDs can also be created in the Linux. That is basically the way we create the virtual volumes in the Linux. Surely, I'll show it up in the next part of our lab, maybe sometime. So in the Linux also we have a concept of creating our virtual volumes. So I can go ahead and combine these disks into one size, and then we'll be able to get better performance. So if you think that you want to have a low cost and then you want to get a better performance, then we can think about going to the RAID volumes. Specifically, let's say I'm hosting a database on one of my EC2 instance. Let's say it's a NoSQL database, like Mongo and Cassandra DB are the NoSQL database, which is not available in this services part here. So if you see in the database section, Amazon has got its own NoSQL database, that is DynamoDB. Now let's say if you want to install MongoDB or Cassandra DB, you have to specifically use your own EC2 machine inside which you are going to install this Mongo or Cassandra NoSQL database. Now, as we all know, the NoSQL database require a little higher IOPS because it has a capacity and the capability of writing the data at much higher speeds. So if you think you have got a front-end system which is going to send a lot of data across, and for that case you would like to use NoSQL database which has a capacity and the capability of storing the data at much faster pace, but along with it your IOPS should also be supported, like input output per second. The number of transactions that are happening also needs to be supported. So if we are going to launch a new volume, specifically we get general purpose SSD or provisioned IOPS. So in provisioned IOPS, I have a control over how many IOPS I would require, right? So if it is a size of 10 GB, I can say that I want 100 IOPS, or I can say I want 1000 IOPS as well. Okay. For 10 GB, let's say I want to have 7. Okay, the maximum is 50:1, so I'll be able to maximum configure up to 50 IOPS in this case, right? However, if you wish to achieve the more IOPS, right, just with the lowest cost, then for the lowest cost option, what are we doing? We are trying to spin up more volumes with the help of general purpose SSD drives. I'll keep it the size as low so that I'll get the base IOPS of 100, and then now if I go ahead and combine this all the 10 hard disks, basically I'll be able to achieve output of 1000 IOPS. Now once I'm able to do it, so my database which is installed inside the system, which is the MongoDB, the NoSQL database, I'll be able to store the data much faster onto it. So in the reality, we use it for those cases where I want to actually improve the situations with the lowest cost. Of course, there are pros and cons, as I said. In the RAID volumes, if I'm going to pick it up as a striped volume, and if anything happens to one of the volume, I lose specifically the data in that case, right? So if I go for mirrored one, it is basically trying to create the multiple copies, like it is trying to create a mirror copy of the same data, right? So again, I'm not getting much space in that. So there are pros and there are cons about it. So any more questions before we move to the next part? Rahul, is that clear? Okay, so let's assume a kind of situation where you want to improve some things, okay, but with the limited resources and the limited billing or the limited money we have, we want to improve the situation. So how do we do it, right? So specifically the placement groups, RAID volumes are the ways in which we'll be able to improve the situations for the end users. Now, given an example of a real-time voting system, okay, like let's say we do watch a lot of TV serials these days. In some of those serials we do get the real-time voting which happens across, right? So during the show is live, I can go ahead and vote for that specific participant, and by the end of that 1 hour of show they are going to also announce the results. So in that case, I am going to get lot of messages across from the world or from the specific country where this show is being aired, and now I have limited set of resources which can be used in this case, right? So what we can do is we can specifically create multiple RAID volumes, try to combine it into one so that it becomes one virtual volume, but I'll get a higher side of IOPS so that we'll be able to store the data into the, specifically in order to collect the votes and other kind of things, we can make use of the NoSQL databases, and we will be able to store the data into those at a much faster pace rather than a normal RDS systems. Okay, the next part that we are going to learn is about AMI, that is Amazon Machine Image. How can we create our own images is something that we are going to learn through. So I'll just go ahead and close the system for a while. I'll come back here. I'll just quickly clean up the system here. Okay, so while this is being getting completed, so let's go back to the next part of our lesson, AMI. Now, what is AMI? So AMI basically stands for Amazon Machine Image. Now, whenever I go ahead and click on the launch instance, I'm basically able to see that there are a lot of AMIs which are available for the ready usage. Like I have got Amazon Linux. There's a new one that has come with the LTS candidate AMI that comes with the latest kernel of 4.9, which is with a much more enhanced performance. And then I have got Red Hat Linux, I have got SUSE Linux, I have got Ubuntu, Windows, and others different AMIs, right? Similarly, if I go to my AMIs, this is the place where I'll be able to see if I have created any machine image on my own. Apart from that, if I go to AWS Marketplace, I'll be able to see the machine images that are being created by the third-party companies like Splunk, SAP, and other companies. We'll be able to check it out. So when you click on the all categories, you'll be able to see what kind of AMIs you're looking from the marketplace. Let's say you're looking for some business softwares. You can just go ahead and click on it, and you'll be able to get all this ready built softwares from the third-party companies like Redmine certified from Bitnami, ONTAP, Cloud for AWS, SaaS Universities, TIBCO, and other things. Now, if I go down to the last option, that is community AMIs, this is the place where people have shared across their own AMIs after they have created in their Amazon console. And once the machine is created, automatically it gets categorized on the basis of the operating system, architecture, and the root volumes. So in our case, first I'll go ahead and pick up the quick start. I'll pick up one of the Amazon Linux machine, and we are going to convert this into an Apache web server, and we'll go ahead and create an image out of it. So I'll quickly go ahead and say configure instance details. I'll just everything leave in this to a default place, 8 GB of size, and then I'll quickly go ahead and add the tags. AMI lab, and then I'll select the existing security group, it is SSH. I'll go ahead and review and launch it. So it is getting initialized. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a lot of different softwares to our machine, and then we are going to pick up the image of this machine so that whenever I'm going to launch a new EC2 instance from the newer AMI, it will all have those pre-installed softwares. Now when we talk about AMI, that is basically a machine image. Now we all have been working in a corporate environment in some or other place. Now when we are going to get a Windows laptop or a Windows computer, let's say in our normal working environment, it will have some softwares pre-installed on top of it. Let's say it has got Chrome browser, along with it some like MS Office, and on top of it maybe some tools which are required for our company's purpose. And maybe some more softwares like video players, etc. Right, so all these things are pre-installed. Now let's say something happened to a computer or laptop and it has specifically it is in bad shape now, and your IT service help desk guy says that it needs to be formatted. So when he says it needs to be formatted, if he just goes down and reinstalls the complete Windows operating system, then again he has to install the Chrome browser, MS Office, the tools of your company, and then the video players, and maybe some configuration could have to be done inside this, right? So it is going to take a lot of time for any specific system to get it repaired back. Now how can he improve the specific situation in this case? So specifically he is going to create an image out of it, so that whenever your system has to be formatted, he doesn't need to format it to Windows operating system. He will specifically format on the basis of this image, so that all these tools automatically come back. And that is where we see that the formatting gets completed within a span of just 15 or 20 minutes, and we will be able to get back our complete machine. So this is how it is done. So basically they have got an image. The image consists of all the tools pre-installed in it, and I just need to replicate the image and I'll be able to get it back. Similarly, I have launched one Linux machine first here, and I'm going to go inside this Linux machine. We are going to install some softwares inside it, and we are going to make some configurations, and then I'm going to create an image out of it, so that whenever I go ahead and launch using the AMI a new EC2 instance, it will have all the prerequisites done for me. So I'll open up the Putty terminal. SSH auth, I'll just go ahead and put across. I'll also change the size of the font here. So it's taking a little while to log in. Again, it has refused to connect because of the same problem yesterday we had, the security group. The IP would have changed. I'll just go and update the security group here. So we have the SSH security group. I'll go to inbound. I'll click on edit. Again, I'll click on my IP. I'll just go ahead and restart. There we go. I'm now able to connect it. So I'll log in as EC2-user. So there we go. So first thing I'm going to do is elevate my privileges. Then I'm just going to go ahead and update all the security patches. So I'll just say yum update -y. Then I'm going to go ahead and install some softwares. Let's say I want to install the HTTPD first. Then I'm going to go ahead and install the PHP. Then let's say I want to install a few more softwares like yum install, let's say I want to install the Docker as well. I would like to also install MySQL, PHP MySQL. We'll also install elinks. So now we have installed a lot of software inside this machine. Apart from that, let's say I want to make some configurations. So I'll go to the cd/var/www/html. Inside this, I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of web pages. Let's say I want to create index.html. And then I'll also create one more file with the name training.html. So I have made some new files inside this. Now let's go down to the etc folder. Let's say ls. I'll go inside the httpd. Let's say ls, and let's say I want to make some changes in this configuration as well. Yeah, so I have the configuration file here. Like let's say I've got php conf file. Let's say I want to add some random text here. And let's go ahead and save this. So let's say now this is the machine I have got, which has got a lot of software installed, some web pages being created, some configurations being done, right? So if I have to get the system, if something happens to the system and I have to format it back, right? So again, I have to do all the things that we have just done now, right? So it will be really difficult for me to remember all these things to again get through. So what we can do is specifically, now that I have got the system in a working mode with the application. Let's say I wanted to have Apache, I wanted to have PHP, I wanted to have MySQL connection, I wanted to have some web pages created for it. So and the configuration changes, so everything is updated. So this system is now ready. Let's say whenever I'm going to get a new client for my company, I'm going to just create the web pages and put it across into this system which has got all the prerequisites installed, right? So I'm going to specifically create an AMI out of it, so that this AMI is going to help me all the time. So creating AMI is very simple. I'll just click on this one. So before that, I'll just go ahead and start the service, that is Apache service. Okay, so we have made some change in the php.conf file, which is actually causing this problem. I'll just make change there. Let's put it like this. And I'll also ensure that my Apache service is always up and running. Okay, so now things are working much fine. Now if you go back to this instance here, and if you just open up this IP address, okay, I just need to open up the security group here for this one. I'll also apply this web server security group. Now if I go back and refresh, there we go. It is showing this is my web page, right? So everything is ready for this EC2 instance. All I need to do is specifically go back and just create a AMI out of it. So creating the AMI is very simple. Just go ahead and click on this EC2 instance here and click on the actions, and then just say click on image and then say create image. So when I click on the create image, it is going to ask me the name of the image. I'll just say web server configuration. I'll copy the same name and put it in the description. And then you have one more option which says no reboot. Now if you see the no reboot, what does this option mean here? So if I'm going to go ahead and click on create AMI and check out this option as well, which means my server will be still up and running for the end users, and while the server is being running, it is going to create an image. But that is not a recommended practice, because there could be some transactions happening on my application or the EMI, sorry, or EC2 instance, so which is not a recommended practice. So it says whenever you're going to enable this option, Amazon EC2 is not going to shut down the instance before creating the image. And if you are going to do that, the system integrity on the image cannot be guaranteed. So the image, whatever is going to get created, will not be guaranteed whether it's going to work fine or not. So it's always recommended that whenever you want to create an image out of a running instance, first shut the instance down and then pick up the image out of it. So I'm not going to enable this option. I'll just leave blank. And it is also showing that this EC2 instance has got currently one root volume, which is of size 8 GB and is of type general purpose SSD, and they're going to create an image out of it. So the image request has been received. So it is going to take a little while for the image to get created. So then you can come down to the AMIs and check out the progress. So currently it is showing pending state. It will just take a few minutes. In the meanwhile, any doubts or queries from any one of you? It will take the full backup of the system. So along with the configurations, whatever we have done, everything will be taken care in this. Yeah, so now my system is almost ready. You have seen this, the server has expected to be closed because it has been shut down. So I'll close this. Okay, in the meanwhile, In the meantime, while it is getting created, you can just go down to the snapshots and check out that there will be one snapshot that has been actually created for the root volume of the instance which is currently running, right? So this is the root volume. Where is go? Yeah. So this is the root volume of the current EC2 instance of the size 8 GB. And for this, when we were trying to create an image, the snapshot has got created here, which says that this has actually been created by the image. I'll just delete the unrequired things here. Okay, so I guess the AMI should have been created by now. Yeah, there it is available. Now what I'm going to do is I'll quickly go ahead and terminate the instance which is currently running. I do not require it anymore. Like, let's say some problem happened and I had to unfortunately close this off. But luckily I have got the AMI, so which is going to help me out in this case. I'll just go ahead and click on launch instance, come down to my AMIs. You'll be able to see that the web server configuration AMI is now available, and I am the owner of this one. I'll just go ahead and say select. I'm going to use T2 Micro. I'll leave everything else default in this page, and then it's going to be 8 GB of size with general purpose SSD drive. And I'm going to go ahead and add the back here name. I'll just say web server. And then I'll quickly put it back behind the security code that is SSH and the web server. So I'll click on launch. So this is now going to launch my EC2 instance with the image that we had actually created. Now again, I don't have to go back into the system and install all the softwares. It will be all pre-installed in this. I just need to copy the public IP address and put it across in the browser, and I'll be able to see that my web server will be up and running. So there we go. My web server is up and running now. All I need to do is just copy this IP address and put it across in this, and you'll be able to see that it is automatically running. So I haven't made any changes in the configuration, but I have got all the web pages, all the configurations, all the softwares that are installed inside this readily available for me. Right, and I'll also be able to see these web pages across. So that was about the AMI. So AMI is basically the machine image which can be created so that it saves the time for us, right? And now we are going to learn about in the next class on how these AMIs are going to help in when I want to auto scale the systems. So auto scaling and the load balancers and the EFS, that are the next upcoming topics of our sessions in the next 2 days. So any questions or queries before we close for the day? Okay. How about you, Kirti? Are you able to follow through? Thanks all. Have a great day, and we'll meet back tomorrow at early 7, and we'll start the session a little early so that we'll be able to complete much more topics. Bye all. Have a great day.